Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto 2 Blue Vortex manga chapter review. This one's going to be for chapter 9, which is called Nine Tails. So, interesting chapter title there, of course, based on the cliffhanger for the last one. Overall, I thought that this was a pretty interesting chapter. It didn't really, I would say, explain much. It more just represented the cliffhanger of like, oh, this is what you thought then. Well, yeah, some of that is the case, but you still basically have all the questions that you had previously, because there really was only kind of one way they were probably going to do this, and so it was relatively obvious what that was. We did have the preview establishing that, okay, Boruto and Kawaki are going to meet up, and that probably went the way we expected to as well. But interestingly, they are kind of finally bringing up other aspects of Boruto, that being like, hey, Boruto and karma, what's going on with that? And so they kind of teased a little bit there of like, okay, there's a weakness for Boruto. He doesn't seem to be able to control the karma. What's going on there? Does it relate to Momoshiki? Momoshiki still, I don't believe, has been mentioned in the 9 chapters of 2 Blue Vortex so far. And we're kind of waiting to see that sort of stuff come into play. Otherwise, like, I would say that maybe the chapter didn't progress things as much as I perhaps would have wanted to. It again did the thing that this manga does at times, where it probably overused a bunch of pages to just show kind of transitional action, rather than kind of significant pieces of action, when maybe more could have been done to develop the villains, to set up what's going on kind of elsewhere. And it's just the idea as usual, monthly chapter, 40 pages. Have you used those pages effectively? Does this feel like a full month's worth of a chapter or not? And Boruto's problem historically has been that very few chapters have felt like they've met that mark, even though the content is actually pretty good. So let's jump into it here and kind of go through it page by page. So our cover page here with the title, of course, Nine Tails, is Inoshika Cho. So cool to see them all kind of post-time skip in color here. Very cool, given that they have a pretty nice section of the chapter kind of devoted to them a little bit here. And otherwise, we jump straight in here. So yes, Jura and Hidari confronting Team 10 plus Himawari. The cliffhanger being, of course, that Jura has tracked the kind of chakra signature of the Nine Tails to, hopefully, in his case, Naruto, but it's actually led him to Himawari. And there's some interesting stuff, as he says at the start here. We thought we were chasing Uzumaki Naruto. We were actually surprised when we found this little girl. So, interesting point here. Jura does not know who Himawari is. And so it again brings up this idea of he's going off older information of like, he still assumes Naruto is a Jinchuriki, and it's basically, this is pre-fight with Ishiki Naruto that Jura thinks that he has. So again, is he based off Ishiki, and this is why his knowledge isn't really up to date. What's going on here? So while this standoff is kind of happening, Shikadai gets in touch with the sensory unit and basically requests backup here, that they've confronted the 2 infiltrators, basically. He tries to kind of stall them a little bit. Interestingly, Jura kind of opens up a book and is like, this is who you are. Nara Shikadai of Moegi's team and the current Hokage's son. So he has to read a book to figure out who these people are. Interesting one. So he's like, do you have a message from my dad or something? But it's like, no, actually, we are only here for his predecessor. We came here following Uzumaki Naruto's trail, so we were surprised when, we found this happened, basically. And Inujin is kind of like, what? Why do you think Lord Seventh is here? Because 3 years ago, everyone else is, as far as they're aware, he was killed. That's the story. That's why Boruto is kind of exiled from the village after the whole swap around situation. And Shikadai's just like, nope, stop. They don't need to know that. He doesn't have the information, so we're going to kind of move on. But interestingly, he does say, I see. Well, he definitely doesn't seem to be anywhere in this village, for the only Nine-Tail signature is coming from this girl. So this is where we get the full confirmation that, yes, he was specifically tracking the Nine-Tails, not just general tailed beast chakra. So just the important details of all of this. And this is where it's obviously becomes aware to everyone of like, this is what's going on here. He says to them, I'm tracking Nine-Tails and I'm sensing it from Himawari. And everyone's like, wait, what? She has it? How? What's going on? And no one has any idea what's going on here. And Shikadai wants answers, but Jura doesn't know what's happening. He's just like, hey, the world keeps raising one question after another. But he says that, and yet I like that. So this has been the characterization of him as like this evolving being coming into intelligence. He likes that there are questions he doesn't have the answer to and is intrigued by the prospect of sort of finding out. So that's kind of, it seems like the next level here of like trying to figure all of this stuff out. But he makes his decision here. This is one of the interesting points of like, okay, now that this is the case, does he leave to go after Naruto, or does he actually want Himawari? And why? Because his target is apparently Naruto. But then it gets into the idea of, does this change who his target is because he misinterpreted it, or is it very, very specifically Naruto who he's after? Because all the others have targets, of course, that aren't related to tailed beasts, so what exactly is going on is the idea. So yeah, he tries to use wood style basically here to grab Himawari. She gets trapped in a kind of tree, but of course Team 10 jump into action, and we get some shadow paralysis jutsu here to kind of stop it from progressing. Cartoon beast mimicry to get her out. Saved by, of course, Chocho with the big hands, and Jura even compliments the team on like, you know, incredible coordination without a single verbal exchange. They just like acted and did it in tandem. So that's the whole idea here. And he's basically like, okay, our target for today is Himawari. We don't have any issue with you. However, if you keep resisting, we will have to attack you. This is where Shikadai is put in touch with Shikamaru, so his father. And the report he gives is, enemy's target is Himawari. Reason isn't clear, but it has to do with Nine-Tails. And Shikamaru is like, wait, what? And so we do get some shots here of then Himawari kind of getting her reaction to this. And she's thinking to herself, I don't get it. Why me? Like she doesn't understand herself. So there doesn't appear to be any sort of secret reveal that like Himawari had been keeping it a secret for a while, that she already knew about this, and this is just how they're choosing to reveal it to the audience. No, it's news to her as well. In a way, kind of highlighting, has just a certain amount of time passed to cause this like awakening to a certain degree, or has something specifically triggered this awakening. But then we cut to, of course, Kawaki is unconscious. He needs to be woken up. And I'm guessing this is Amado watching Kawaki through Delta's eyes, basically, on a computer monitor. And he's just like, hey, wake up, wake up. But then he does get a look at Jura and is like, wait, what is this guy? Is what we get. So that's an interesting one, because of course Amado was so important in taking down Ishiki. Is that the connection that we're meant to make here? Does Amado know something specifically about Jura and what he is, or who he's based on? That's a big question. Then we could, interestingly, away to Boruto, because of course Boruto had just immediately left to avoid Kawaki's detection right as Jura and Hidari arrived in the village, but now he basically needs to go back. And so we see he's in a, I guess it's an underground base under some kind of field of kind of stone pillars, and they're underground. And we do get to see Kashin Koji again, which is interesting. They kind of reintroduced him and he just left, and it's just like, okay, not going to explain anything. You've obviously trained Boruto to a certain level, but anything more than that, and they don't seem ready to really tell us. Boruto does have a little bit of a reaction though to he's something happening with his karma mark. He looks at it, which again hasn't really been a focus for Two Blue Vortex, is highlighting that idea of Boruto has a karma mark and what does that mean. He's shown amazing skill with his kind of ninja skill set, but the karma stuff hasn't really come into play yet. Also the Momoshiki stuff as well. So Kashin Koji is like, hey, Boruto, they've made a move because he has a toad monitoring the situation, and they can see that obviously people have been killed. There's an attack that's come in, and he basically is just like, yeah, you need to go out there. Boruto's like, where? Konoha? Yeah. And he says, yeah, fly to the triangle. And triangle is bolded as if it's like a key term. We don't really see what like the idea of this is. Now, maybe someone has some answer to this, or is this meant to be a mystery about this? But it's just like, fly to the triangle, whatever that means. So he, basically just puts his cloak on, flying Raijin jutsus out of there, and Boruto is basically back in the village. We cut back to Shikadai, and he says, like, okay, you were following Naruto's trail. So what's going on here? Now you're after Himawari. Why is that? And Jura just explains that we followed the Nine Tails trail and happened to sense his chakra signature in Himawari. So it is the confirmation here, I guess, of him realizing that, okay, her name is Himawari Uzumaki. He's not fully, I suppose, connecting all the dots together yet. And Shikadai does note, or is this Shikamaru? It's hard to tell because, of course, from this side profile, they look basically identical. Either way, I guess they're both effectively thinking the same thing. Why Himawari? I thought the Nine Tails was dead. Okay. And then Himawari reacts to this and is like, Nine Tails chakra. And she's obviously with Chocho, and she's just like, oh, that probably has to be a mistake. There's no reason for them to be after you. But Jura just again points out that, like, we're surprised by this, that the fact that this situation exists, we're really surprised by this. But we'll figure this out by devouring you, Uzumaki Himawari. And so this is obviously the threat here of, like, he's not going to let them take her away. And this is him going to now fight Inoshika Cho. So real kind of threatening situation. They are not going to be a match for Jura here, of course, because if Kawaki wasn't, they are not going to be either. Shikamaru is kind of panicking a little bit and is just like, okay, get some people out there. We need some backup for Team 10 immediately. Then we get a Toad saying, like, link up with Yamanaka Ino. Boruto's entered Konoha. So this is how Boruto kind of connects to Shikamaru to get in the loop and what's going on in the village, basically. This is where Kawaki properly wakes up. And, of course, we get the reaction of Delta being like, I couldn't face you if you had died. I couldn't face Ada if you had died. But yeah, he just says, yeah, I'm nearly fully healed. And she just points out, yeah, you have near limitless regenerative abilities, but you still shouldn't be reckless. And so they're about to head on their way to basically back up Team 10. But he's going to stay because Boruto has arrived, like, right next to him. So this is basically building up to the big confrontation that we saw from the preview page for this chapter. And yeah, the report that we get here is that, like, from the Toad, Mokuton Jutsu, there's no mistake, it's them all right. So Mokuton is basically just wood-style jutsu. So this is obviously a signature thing of, the Divine Tree characters, highlighting that it is for sure them who've arrived on the scene. Because again, Boruto has not encountered Hidari and Jura just yet, so he's just finding out from the jutsu here that that's what's actually going on here. Again, we established the idea of Boruto has a private line to Shikamaru, and he informs him that there are 2 divine trees here, and now that they initially came looking for Naruto, but now they're after Himawari, and so Boruto does react to that, of course, and he roughly gets the information that, like, it seems that the Nine Tails chakra is involved. Does this ring any bells? And Boruto just has a bit of a, like, huh? Nine Tails? So he's obviously surprised by this as well. This does not ring any bells, it seems like, to Boruto. So what's happening to Himawari is completely unexpected to pretty much everyone involved, of course, here. We even get a quick shot of Kashin Koji. Of course, he's hearing this information and having a bit of a reaction himself. But what exactly that is hard to make out, because Kashin Koji's role and involvement in the story is not inherently clear, outside, I guess, of being Boruto's stand-in master with the Sasuke, stuck in a tree, basically. So, yeah, this is where Kawaki contacts the sensory unit and is just like, okay, this is what's happening. I'm confronting Boruto here. Boruto reports to Shikamaru, like, that, hey, Kawaki's found me. What are we doing here? And he's kind of like, I'm going to go over there. You can come if you want. And we obviously get the reaction from Kawaki, like, are you mocking me? And the fight from the preview page happens here. He activates his ocular jutsu here, sends some kind of rods, basically, at Boruto. He just slightly dodges them, just barely, like, he does as much as he needs to avoid them, but it is effortless, basically, from Boruto. It shows the skill level here. Tries again, Boruto does it once again. He charges him, but Boruto's just casually walking towards Kawaki. Kawaki charges him, but Boruto basically just gut punch here. Literally punches him in the gut, sends him flying back, and just from this one blow, Kawaki's like nearly out cold again. Like, he's on the ground, like, writhing in pain. It's not like the fight is over, but this is a pretty devastating blow from Boruto here, even though it's just a punch. So everyone is surprised by this, including Boruto, because he's kind of like, pitiful. Haven't you been training at all? And Delta's reaction is like, more like, how much did you train? But it's probably both. The idea is that Boruto seems to have hyper trained to an insane degree to get to this level with his just shinobi skills, but it does seem like kind of Kawaki has basically completely plateaued by creating this comfortable kind of situation for himself, and hasn't pushed himself in the same way that Boruto has. But then we get the big moment here. So Kawaki activates his karma as he gets back to his feet. The resonance, of course, happens here. So this basically activates Boruto's karma. And this is a bit of a panic moment for Boruto. He's surprised by this. He doesn't really know what to do. And Boruto, I'm guessing this is Kashin Koji telling him, you need to leave now. Put distance between you or you're going to lose control. So this seems to be a known thing. And Boruto needs to get out of there, like, immediately. Now, lose control. What exactly do they mean there? I'm guessing it is the idea of it probably allows Momoshiki to come to the surface when otherwise Boruto has complete control over Momoshiki. But the second karma comes into play, Momoshiki has kind of an access point, effectively. So the fear is Boruto losing control of his body to Momoshiki. We haven't really addressed it yet, but it feels like now we kind of need to, now that this has actually been brought up. Finally, it's sort of like a weakness for Boruto in Two Blue Vortex, and that is that, as Kawaki points out here, he can't control his karma. Like, he's so skilled otherwise, but he just doesn't seem to have any control over the karma. So here is a way Kawaki can kind of get the advantage over Boruto, is by turning it into a karma fight. And suddenly Boruto has to restrict himself by focusing on not having this thing overtake him, basically. So what we have here is Inojin and Himawari on one of his kind of drawn, kind of Super Beast Scroll kind of birds. And so they're about to fly away. Of course, Jura is locked in place by Shikadai's kind of shadow paralysis here. But he just turns around and is just like, okay, and opens one eye. I guess this is what Rinnegan eye, effectively, and seems to just tail Beast Bomb. Just generates one right there, and they're like, oh no. So Chocho punches Jura at this point, knocks him aside. This basically makes a crater in the ground as everyone is sent kind of flying, of course, here. But they manage to, of course, avoid this, like, properly being, like, fully powered up and going off, but still, it's caused obviously a ton of damage here. So they've Himawari and Inojin have avoided it by being in the sky, of course, but on the ground it's a bit of a disaster zone. We still have Sarada and Sumire running, and they're like, Himawari, everyone please be okay. So they'll eventually arrive, I guess. Bit frustrating there, an entire chapter, and they're still running. But anyway, so yeah, Shikadai calls for a lift also on the bird, and so they swoop down, grab them as Jura gets back to his feet from being knocked down. Hidari's like, they're getting away, is that okay? He says their target is Himawari. They knew what they had to do, but I guess they intend to keep resisting to the bitter end. And he finds this interesting, because Hidari's kind of like, that's not very intelligent, that like they would do anything, like risk their lives to save her. Why? That doesn't make any sense from kind of our stage of intelligence, but Jura points out that no, that's not quite true. Something is driving them past their survival instincts. What that something is likely to be crucial information for us. And so that's the kind of point there, is like, okay, the Team 10 and Himawari is going to get away here. They're kind of like, we're safe here with Himawari because they're not just going to send that attack up at us because they want to capture or devour Himawari. So they're not just going to like kill her from distance, effectively. That's not what they're trying to accomplish here. So they're like, we should, either way, shouldn't we fly out of the village? That's the best way to get away. Himawari then speaks up and is like, let me off somewhere alone. I'll escape on my own. But they're like, no, we won't let you, we have to catch you. If you jump off, like, we'll catch you, basically. But she points out that, like, they're too strong. This is what I have to do. You're going to die effectively trying to protect me. And effectively, I don't want that. But she's cut off as she's saying this because suddenly she transitions into the kind of tailed beast inner space. This is where, of course, Naruto and Kurama or other Jinchurikis would interact with the tailed beast in their mind, effectively. It's the kind of chakra space. I forget what exact terminology is given to this, but that's what we're doing here. So she's like looking around, and we do cut to the outside of this to kind of highlight it's happening in her head. Like, Shikadai's just looking at her, and she's just like zoned out, kind of looking off into the distance, like she's in her head, basically. Where, am I? And so we then get the right angle here, and we see what's in there with her. And we get some dialogue from this much smaller nine-tailed fox. Good grief, I can't believe that jerk, 10 Tails, would sniff me out. Himawari turns around, and it says to her, little girl, you know who I am? ? And she's like, you're Nine Tails, right? And that's where we end the chapter with this new nine-tailed fox here. Looks like Kurama, just obviously smaller, like a younger version of Kurama, basically. But the dialogue gives you the impression that it's a different, like, individual here. This is not Kurama. It is a nine-tailed fox, but it's not Kurama. Because otherwise, one, I think Himawari would call it Kurama because she would know that, I'm guessing. And then Kurama, for sure, would know her more than little girl. He would know that it's Himawari because, of course, of how close he was to Naruto. Of course, he knows the name of Naruto's daughter. That's the kind of point here. So what's going on here at the end? This is probably what we realistically expected it to be. They are doing this kind of, the nine-tailed fox is back, but they seem to be going in the direction of Kurama is not back. This is not the person, the beast, effectively, that Naruto knew. The Nine Tails, effectively, is back, but it's a different individual that Himawari is going to interact with. Now, they might switch this around and just maybe highlight that, like, oh, it is Kurama, just memories reset or something like that. But I think the approach they should take is to very much treat this as a different kind of entity that has a different name. It is the Nine-Tailed Fox by position, but it's not Kurama. I think that's the approach that they should take here. Obviously, explanation is required because we still didn't get the why. We got a lot of characters reacting to like, huh? And saying, why? How? Obviously, this is some case of, I'm guessing Himawari was born with a small fraction of the Nine-Tailed Fox's chakra in her. So when Kurama died in Baryon mode, it was the actual true final death of Kurama, but because there was some Nine-Tailed Fox somewhere else, it allowed for the position of the Nine-Tailed Fox to kind of exist, but not enough for, I guess, Kurama's kind of consciousness to kind of maybe transfer over. Because that's the kind of thing that we're fighting here, is the idea of, yes, it is a lore detail in Naruto that, as far as we're aware, if a tailed beast is just killed under sort of normal circumstances, the tailed beast will reform after a certain period of time. This is the whole situation with, Jinchurikis. When they die, if the tailed beast is still sealed in them, they basically take the tailed beast with them for a certain period of time, but the tailed beast comes back sort of freed at a later point. That's what has been established previously. The interesting point, though, again, is that Baryon mode, as the specific way in which Kurama died, at least to me, read as a way to make you very much believe that this is a permanent death. Because otherwise, it seems like Naruto could have just waited a while and Kurama would come back. And so, okay, he's without Kurama for a certain period of time, but Kurama can just come back. Like, they were not talking about it as if this is just a very common thing that can happen. This was a true loss of someone. Naruto is going to lose someone very close to him with the death of Kurama, that it was permanent. Because again, the way that Baryon mode was described as working feels like it was literally a technique that effectively consumed the essence that effectively makes up Kurama, to take away the life force, the energy of Ishiki. That it was this inherently destructive, self-sacrificing technique that was literally removing what Kurama was from existence, which is different than just they're trapped in a Jinchuriki, they die, but their energy doesn't suddenly, their energy is not destroyed. Their energy is still there. It just, they die with someone and they're reborn elsewhere. That chakra goes somewhere else. Whereas this is kind of like Baryon mode was sort of like taking that chakra almost out of the system. But now they're kind of going for the idea of, like, I'm guessing, whatever way they're going to explain how Himawari has a bit of chakra related to the Nine-Tailed Fox, it has allowed a new one to form around it. It's super interesting because it obviously creates a great importance around Himawari as a character. But the real question is like, okay, but what does this mean? Because my fear with this is that I don't overly trust this manga when it comes to utilizing well characters who are not Boruto or Kawaki. I think Sarada has fallen into this a little bit. There's still room. I think they'll give her arc eventually when it comes to the fight against Hidari, which I assume is coming. They'll explain a lot of the Sharingan technique stuff, and they'll build up to some big moments between Sarada and Hidari, and I guess Sarada and Sasuke as well, whenever they come back to that. But I'm just hoping that because this is like, okay, you have effectively given Naruto's daughter the, like, key unique thing that Naruto had at the start of the series. Surely you can't just sideline this character after doing this massive reveal. But there's just the sense of like, what does this do for her? Because okay, she's now a young Jinchuriki, I guess. That it gives her access to power that puts her on a pretty good level. But a lot of the top level characters are like up here, well beyond just like standard Jinchuriki. So in a way, what exactly does this do that really makes her kind of feel more unique as such? That's the kind of question kind of going on here. And then it's just the idea of like, who can she get information about this from? Like, it would be Naruto, but he's not around. Killer Bee feels like kind of one of the only other ones in terms of training her when it comes to this. I guess Yamato could be reintroduced. He seemed to know some of the stuff about this. Some of the, I guess, older characters in the Leaf Village would be able to help her. But there's just a bit of a sense for where, like, I'm like, I hope they don't leave this plot point. I think it's now is the time to address this. And I really hope Chapter 10 is the chapter that gets into that. Because Chapter 10, I think, now has the potential to be a really interesting chapter where we have this maybe really interesting conversation between Himawari and the Nine Tails explaining some of this. And then also, theoretically, have Boruto, the explanation when it comes to Boruto and the Karma Mark, and maybe like the reintroduction of Momoshiki and what's happening there. In terms of the more kind of complex, kind of lore, kind of detailed stuff. Because there is a bit of a technical explanation that is required on the Himawari Jinchuriki situation, in the sense of, if she was born with it, then why wasn't Boruto potentially an option? Now, obviously there is just a case of assigning powers to characters, and maybe it just skipped Boruto or whatever. But is there a significance to Himawari versus Boruto, and what is the situation? Could this not work with Boruto because of like the Jogan or something else in play? It's sort of unclear. But yeah, I think that's most everything I want to say about the chapter. A little bit of just like, okay, moving pieces into the right positions. At least everyone is roughly in the same like vicinity here. Obviously Boruto has left again after having just arrived, but it allows for I think an interesting exploration if we actually do anything with it. The question obviously is, okay, what happens here? Jura is going to pursue Himawari, I guess. What fends off who, or what fends off Jura? Because Kawaki is not strong enough. Boruto would be a challenge, but he's obviously struggling with the karma. What do we do here? And then it gets into the idea of, if Himawari activates some sort of Jinchuriki, like chakra mode, even if they have her go straight to like one of like Naruto's like end game chakra modes, is that enough? And I'm kind of like, I guess it theoretically is, but do you want to do that straight away, or do you want to actually explore what it means for Himawari to have a tailed beast inside of her? Because of course, if they are on more friendly terms, you can avoid a lot of the really challenging early stages of like Naruto's growth when it comes to Kurama, because they will trust each other from an earlier point, and we can jump straight to the whole like final kind of stages of that stuff. But you know, interesting. Otherwise it's just like, okay, what fights are happening when? I feel you also, of course, where they did highlight again this now 2 chapters in a row where like Sarada's only involvement in the chapter is running to get to the person who looks like her father. I'm assuming next chapter you probably have to have her arrive on the scene and at least see him to have that reality of what happened hit. I'm maybe thinking we're going to do a little bit of a break, and maybe like this is not quite where all the fights full on happen, and we will have a bit of a sense for like, okay, Juro will retreat, but like we're coming back eventually. Because it is a bit weird that like it is only 2 of the Divine Tree characters here and not all 4. And like we're not really referencing the others either, of course, where one of them's going to want to go after Ada, and one of the other ones, the Moegi one, who was referenced kind of in a way, is going to want to go after Konohamaru, who isn't in the chapters, and you feel like he has to be reintroduced. And what way are we doing this is kind of the real question. So they're my thoughts. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on Chapter 9 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. But yes, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.